Hello everyone, I'm Francis Sealey from Global Net 21 and Enfield Voices, and as you can see I've got a lady with me today who's going to join in a discussion, Nerina Finetto. You can see her here and she will be talking with us in a conversation. What we're hoping to do is look at how we can hold conversations across borders, because in the world we're living in today, we have lots of issues that face us that we can't deal with alone in our own countries. Pollution, economic changes, and most of all, climate change need frameworks at an international level. And it also means that we need to discuss with each other across borders, across nation states, across disciplines, across all sorts of borders about these issues and how we can approach them. So, we're going to start this discussion now. Anyhow, Nerina, thanks for joining in this conversation. Now, we're planning to develop a number of webinars, aren't we? Or we hope to, anyhow, that encourage conversations across borders. Why do you think that is important?
As you know, Francis, hi and hello everybody. And as you know, Francis, I started the platform Tracy Streams a couple of years ago, and the idea of the platform was what we say, to have conversations beyond borders, disciplines, races, languages. And why we started doing this, it was really it grew out of the feeling that we in our society, even though we speak about a global society, we keep building more bridges, more walls than bridges. And I had the feeling that very often we forget to ask the most relevant questions about why we are doing this, what we would like to reach out with our life. And the purpose of the platform is to interview researchers from different countries, different disciplines, and to give them, on one hand, to give them the opportunity to share their knowledge, to share their wisdoms, and to give us the opportunity to share the wisdom out of the academia, to bring it to, let's say, a global audience. But on the other end, to start share stories and narratives that are a little bit out of the main story or narrative that we live in.
Let me ask you about the stories, because that's sort of really interesting, because we say we need to share information and data and everything across borders, but in order to connect, to make people understand what we're talking about very often, because we all talk in specialist language, storytelling is something that you think is pretty important, don't you?
Yes, like you, Francis, I guess. And what I think is that the shortest way between two people is a conversation. This is, as I would frame it in a broader way, because on one hand, there is always this personal encounter between two people, and where the magic of this, what to say, the stories, it happens in the moment, and I share my stories, but you listen to my story. And on the other hand, if we take in a broader meaning, if we do not have an imagination about our future, as I usually say, if we might find the words, then we might find a way. This means that for our common imagination, if we do not start thinking about possible future, about possible narratives, then we might not reach them. This means, answering to your question, I believe, and this is the purpose, that the stories we share, the story we listen to, that are not only share ourselves, but share also the common imagination, and broader said, shape our future. This is what.
Well, I mean, I guess we do quite a bit of that in Global Net 21, but you've done a lot of that as well, haven't you? I mean, you've got a Trace Dream site, haven't you? You've got a lot of people on there. Many of them are researchers who do want to share a story.
Yes, so this is I think when answering the first question that you and me, we ask each other, why it is important to have this kind of conversations. And we know that in order to change culture, to change our way to see things, you have to have the personal connection to a person. And so, in my case, for Tracy Streams, how we are doing this is that we try to give the people that we interview really the space for speaking about what they really care about, what are their dreams, what are the future that they would like to have for themselves, for our society. But if I ask you, Francis, because this is always the question, how do we go from the stories that we tell to the impact that we, as a change in our behavior, a change in our society? And so we say on Tracy Demas is the change begins with wonder, and this is the point that if I encounter you, if I meet you, I have to have the openness to think that I may learn something and I may be wrong in one of my beliefs, as this kind of openness. And this is also our purpose, to try to bring this like a way of see lives, a way of building together our futures, also listening to different voices, embracing this diversity of voices. But what I really like in what you are doing, because you are not only this kind of community online, but you have a community offline. And so how do you get from this kind of, also these stories, this discussion, but also this creative community, what you have done pretty well, I think. Well, tell me a little bit about
Well, I mean, what we've done is basically, I mean, you know, we think, I suppose, at least I think, and have written about it, is that ideas are action in a way. If you don't have the right ideas, you don't take the right action. And in a world that's changing, where we've got to cross borders, where many of the ideas that we had in the 19th and 20th century are sort of old-fashioned, or, you know, they're not up to scratch. We need to rethink how we work together and how we have democracy and accountability when we must work together. We can't go back to the old nation state sort of democracy only, because problems are international. So how do you move from action? How do you move from that concept to developing people thinking differently is the first step. And, you know, we are now in a digital age. I suppose what we're trying to do, and I've written a book about it, and you know that, you know, Global Public Square, which is really about how we extend the public square in the digital age. In ancient Greek times, the public square was people actually meeting together physically. People had to learn to tell stories, or else people wouldn't understand it. They walk away, they boo, they shout. In the digital age, we've got to make an effort to do it. We've got to get people to learn a new narrative, which is very difficult often with people shut up in their little tribes and their little boxes, academics particularly, but also people in political parties. And then we've got to find a way for them to network. So we hold a lot of online meetings, but we meetings in real time as well. We're going to start doing that locally, where I live in London. We do it in London generally, often in the House of Commons, often in other venues where we bring people to debate issues. And then they make contact with the people that are speaking. They join those groups. They develop ideas of their own. They network together and they take action which is appropriate to them. So we try to combine the ideas with getting people together, networking, and then going out and taking the actions which are necessary. So that's sort of how we develop it.
I really like what you are saying, because in my opinion, it's, you know, right now everybody speaks about change, changes, change making. And what I really believe is that the change is always personal. It's a personal level. So we have we are not to change anything if we do not change ourselves and the approach that we have to the future, to the present. And the complexity that we have is not only that at a research level, you might not be able to solve the problems that we have if you do not have an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach. This is from the research side, but also from our side as a personal side. We are not going to be able to frame or understand the present and the future that we might live in if we do not embrace the complexity of our reality, but even the complexity of voices, also the complexity of stories that we have. Also, I think that we need a narrative that brings out the fact that we are humans, but at the same time that respect the differences of values, for example, of dreams. And this is, I think, the difficulty of our job, Francis, how I see it, that on one hand we need a common narrative, and on the other hand we have to give voices and spaces to the different narratives and the different values and the different regions and the different religions and the different languages that we have.
I mean, that's a real problem, isn't it? Getting a common language. I mean, for example, you have a lot of researchers on your site and they look fantastic. But, you know, I've had a background of working with academics. I've worked for the BBC Open University. One of my jobs was to try and get academics, when they did the television programs, to talk differently than they talk in their enclosed specialities. And, you know, on social networking now, it's even more difficult. We get an academic on and they may talk in a language that people don't relate to. So if we're going to go across not just national borders, but specialist discipline borders, we've got to get people to learn to speak a language that others connect with, which is a sort of common language. Now, that's work in progress, isn't it? And we don't always get it, you know, as working as well as we would like.
Exactly, and this is, I can imagine that in the conversation that we are going to have, we're going to really in depth speak about the issues that we are going to want to speak about. But in some of the interviews that I have on my site, it's what I usually say, it's less about the knowledge, and I really try, you know, when you speak with a scientist, a specialist about nanotechnology, you might not get everything. But I usually say it is not important, perhaps, that I understand the you know, the facts that you present in your papers, because there are other pages, there are other places where you can find the data, the facts. But it's really about finding a common language, let's say a simple language that everybody can understand, and understand the whys, understand the wisdom, the lessons that I might use for the understanding of the complexity. I don't know if I made the point. I try to explain how we do also our interviews, asking the simple questions and trying to bring a simple answers. And what I think that you were mentioning probably is that the connection with the researchers, and it is also really important, also to make this kind of personal encounter with different researchers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about language, though, is it? It's about actually getting people to understand the necessity to engage. Lots of researchers, for example, hide behind their tribal doors and say they do research, and they don't have the need, or they don't feel it's necessary to engage with a community. I think I mentioned when I spoke to you before about Barbara Bozover's book, Flight Behavior, which is a book about working class people in the upper Appalachians, seeing that monarch butterflies had migrated to their area rather than Mexico, discovering it's about climate change, and they get a scientist out to look at it and research it. But he won't engage, he won't talk to the public about it. He said, that's not my job. But she said, this is vital, we must know about it. So it's getting people out, not just academics, people in political parties, people in business, people in very, very specialized community groups, to jump out of their boxes, to get out of their tribes and talk to people and realize that, they can't use the language or the prejudices that they have to open up, and that's pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, and the difficulty very often is that I usually say your own story is the most difficult one because you are too close to it. And for researchers, very often the point that because they are too close to what they are doing, they do sometimes not see the what is really relevant for somebody who doesn't know this kind of subject. But Francis, you have been working on your platform for a while. What do you think has changed during the last 10 years? And so everybody's saying there is the polarization has become more relevant. What is your experience?
I mean, it depends what you mean by what's changed with us, or what's changed in society. I mean, what's changed with us is we started a very small project and got a lot of people involved, and then went global by using webinars and interviews like this. But we're doing it in an increasingly difficult time. I mean, we're arguing that you should have cross-border conversations. We're arguing that we should have global conversations. Should have conversations across disciplines. But suddenly we see the world drawing into itself. Brexit situation in this country, what's happening in America with Trump and so on, and in Europe, a number of countries having populist movements that want to concentrate again on their own nation state. So in a way, we're fighting an uphill battle because things are changing. But that means that what we're doing is more important than ever, because somehow we've got to get people to come back together to talk about the issues, not be inward looking, but to say, look, you know, for example, climate change could see the extinction of most of our species if we do not take action in the next 10 or 11 years. So we've got to talk about it, and we can't get ideological about it. We've got to look at ways and means that everyone can get involved in their own way. So what's changed really is the atmosphere has got more, you know, aggressive and angry, and it's really, really important to somehow confront that.
Yes, I completely agree with you, because this is one of the topic I really like to speak about, is how in the fact that we love being in a tribe. You know, we want to belong, as though every one of us that needs to belong to an ideology, to an idea, to a country, and every time that even the positive forces that are emerging, in my opinion, they still use very often this kind of words or framing stories in a way that are not opening up for a world where we really look for a common narrative. And I think that what we are doing, and what we, or I hope that will be able to continue analyzing this kind of problems, let's say, is that to pay attention of what kind of narratives we share, and to invite the democratic forces to analyze what kind of messages they are sending out. There are so many different issues that but for example, if we speak about enabling women to take more power, it has not to be against men. So we have to pay attention, you know, to build a common narrative, not to build a narrative that empower another group against the others, also with this us against you. And this is very often, you know, like the hero journey that we have. This is the structure that we have. We have an hero, and we have somebody who's against the hero. And this is the bad guy.
And the other problem we face as well is that we're seeing increasingly a privatization happening of engagement. So universities, for example, we want people to engage. We want academics to go out like they did in the 13th century, the Lollards, and engage with communities to say they have a message. But we've got now universities desperate for money and vice chancellors trying to get payment for everything. So in a way, what we're doing is more important than ever, because what we're saying is, look, there is an aspect to what you do, there's an aspect to what everyone does that belongs, you know, to the common. It's something that we should all share freely and talk over, and not hide behind you know, a prison which says that we will only engage if there is remuneration. We've got to get back to the common, or the idea of the commons, where people come out and they talk freely and openly with each other wherever they come from.
Yes, and this is, I mean, really, a lot of the researchers I spoke with, they felt that, hey, they had to share what they know, because many of them say, you know, the society helped me to become who I am. Now I feel that I want to give back what I know. I want to change the society for the better. And the problem that we had, as perhaps we still have, is that it takes many years before the knowledge that you have in academia arrives the public, the common people, and we need to accelerate this kind of process to bring the knowledge that we have out of academia. But I believe that more than knowledge, we really need wisdom, and I don't know how you see this and how you moderate offline, online the meeting, because we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of data, and the problem that we have is how do we navigate in this kind of amount? How many webinars are produced every day? How many, you know, that there are amounts of videos everywhere, and this is what is needed. I think it's really like a help to navigate this kind of content that we have. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, no, I agree. We often say knowledge is power, but nowadays very often knowledge can, you know, turn into impotence, because there's so much we don't know where to go. So how do you translate that into, as you say, wisdom? And you also talk about it on your site, about the importance of nurturing ecological and social literacy as well. And that's something that you have been concentrating on a great deal.
Yes, I think, for example, what I mentioned before, this kind of the power of narrative, and how we use how many different forces use narratives to influence our lives and influence the way the world is going. And I think that it is really necessary that we become more literate about this kind of situation, that we notice them, that, you know, that they say you only see what you know. If you do not anything about it, probably you are not going to notice it. Yeah, and this is the kind of education or inspiration that I would like to contribute to. And the other point, of course, is now if we speak about ecologic, I don't know if I mentioned with you last time that we spoke, but I read a couple of articles about the fungus and how trees are connected to each other, and all these communication words beyond our normal world. And this is, for example, there are aspects of the reality they do not only belong to biology. I mean, they belong to the understanding that we might have of our world if we know more about really aspects of nature, of climate, of animals, and yes.
Well, I mean, that ecological view is about networking in a way, in a holistic way. And I mean, earlier you asked about how you turn ideas to action and the relation between them. And one of the books that influenced me in the 1970s, boy, that's going back, is Paulo Freire's book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he talked about the praxis, which is the interaction of ideas and action. And that should be constant. You should always be looking at your ideas and then adjusting your action to it, and then going back to see how that changes your ideas and then adjusting your action. And if you look at lots of people's thought processes nowadays, they're stuck in the time warp. They're stuck in an ideological framework. They don't tend to want to change because they've found their home, which gives them a sort of intellectual security. But having that interaction that Paulo Freire talks about is important, but he talked about doing it in a way that was relevant to the communities he worked with in South America, working class, rural communities. So it was creating a narrative where that interaction, that praxis between ideas and action could work. In a way, I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, exactly. This is, I think on one hand, of course, I guess we are going to try to find topics that are really relevant, but at the same time to try to give voices to people from communities, regions, or narratives that are not that common, I guess. And when you were sharing this thought, it came to my mind that they made an experiment where they told people to choose between two different faces. And the researchers, if you choose the let's say face number 1, they show you face number 2, asking you, why did you choose this picture? Also, they show you the picture that you did not choose. But everybody after this was trying to explain why they did this, they made this choice. What I'm saying is that we are really, we want to believe to the stories that we tell ourselves, and we want to believe to the story that we live in. This is why it is so challenging to try to go out and to bring new ways of thinking, of seeing things. But this is why I believe that this kind of conversations, online, offline, and to invite people to first of all to challenge their own beliefs. And as we said already before, I think this is always really a personal change and personal question that might bring a better future for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're getting very close to the end now, but we're going to plan to pilot this idea. I mean, in GlobalNet and Enfield Voices, we do regular webinar interviews in Enfield Voices. It's a very local one. GlobalNet, we take national and global issues. But what we're going to try, and Nerina, by the way, is from Sweden, we're going to try and get people from across Europe, and indeed wider than that across the globe, and Dan, I hope in China, if we can do this, and try to explore some of these ideas. And we're going to try and start with the first one in November. Is that right, Nerina? It was someone called Alexander. Do you just want to tell us very briefly about that?
Yes, probably we are going to speak with Alexander Kagansky, and he is a researcher who I've been in contact for a couple of years now, and what he's really passionate about is biodiversity. Biomedicine for Biodiversity is the founder of a group on this, and I as you know, biodiversity is one big topic, and medicine related to biodiversity is even more interesting. And I think that we are going to speak about this, the fact that related to climate change, of course, but how we humans are acting and reacting on this planet, and how we all belong together, how relevant other species are also for us, not only because it is important that they still are here, but how related we are to them, and how our health might be related to their survival. And this is going to be our topic.
Okay, well, that will be our first one in November. We've yet to sort of confirm the date on that. And then we're going to try and do a monthly strike rate on Conversations Across Borders, which is the working title we've got. May not necessarily be the final title we've got, but we've got to start somewhere. So we're going to do that in November. And, we obviously post that up on all our sites. And I hope you'll join us in that conversation and put your points. And I think it'll be very interesting. And if we can do it, we can actually emphasize this point that, thinking globally and acting locally is very, very important. So even if we live in local areas like the local group we've got, global issues like the ones we're talking about have tremendous local relevance as well to communities, to local government, to people in local areas. And so they're important across the globe and within our own communities. Anyhow, Nerina, thanks for joining us. And, we look forward to doing the first one in November when both of us will then be the interviewers, which is great. It's nice to have two interviewers and you have different styles of questions. So thanks for doing this, Nerina. And, we look forward to November.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really look forward to our collaboration, Francis. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks again, and I hope everyone, found this interesting. So thank you for joining us and watching it and viewing this, and we'll finish this webinar interview now.